Julia, we're going to talk about MapServer. So MapServer is basically a tool to output images and maps. As the most basic MapServer is just a CGI application. And what it does is just uses information that you have on your map file or even through a URL and outputs an image according to the specifications that you give. On the other hand, you can also use MapScript. And MapScript is just a tool that pretty much does the same as MapServer as a CGI. It has the same feature, but it has functions to be able to build upon MapServer. So if you want to implement something that is not in there, you can use MapScript. And MapScript, I think it's available on PHP, Python, and even C#. So if you have if you're more comfortable using programming instead of the map file that is just configuration, that would be the way to go. So currently the current version of MapServer is 6.0.3, and this version changes every month or so. So they basically just pick some bugs that people are keeping track of and through a forum. And the license is the MIT. You can get pre-compiled installer versions using these URLs. The features that MapServer support is basically you can have raster or vector data. You can use through MapServer. You can use Python and PHP as I said. MapServer also has cross-platform support, so you can use it on Linux, macOS, or Windows. It has on the fly projection. So if you have data in one projection and you want to output in another projection, the map file can take care of that. And well, you can the MapServer has capabilities to customize your output. So it's quite easy to do that with just given labels and in order to set up MapServer, the easiest way is to use a pre-compiled installer, because if you do it step by step, I think you will have to install at least 10 libraries to make it useful. And even the MapServer community doesn't recommend that, because if you don't know what you're doing, it's kind of difficult to keep it going. So when you use a pre-compiled installer, you will basically want to do an advanced install, because the Express install doesn't have that many features. So if you want to have more flexibility, you would use an advanced install, and then you will have a list of packages that you would like to use. So if you would like to use PHP or Python or anything, you can select the ones that you want to. And if you have this pre-compiled standard, you usually have Apache. So if you don't have this or IIS, you can just download it from here. And finally, you just let the installer fetch the package and run Apache if you don't have it. And usually, to use MapServer, you will go to your local host and just if you have to specify a port, and that will be the way that you use MapServer.
Do you have to install in Apache, or can you also use IIS or something?
You can use Apache or IIS, but it's a requirement. You have to have either of them. So in order to add a layer in the MapServer, you need to use a map file. And a map file is basically the heart of MapServer. It's just a configuration file, and you have to go through the documentation to get the labels. So you basically, in the map file, you obviously need to have a map and the layers and some attributes. The attributes basically, what it does is you can customize your layers through those attributes. So you can give like a class and a style, color, and that sort of thing. So if you want to, this is an example that what we're doing on table map. So if you want to use SQL in the layer, that's what you have to do. So this is just how a map file looks like. And at the most basic, you will have to give a layer, a style, and a projection. So the projection that we see on the top of the map is just a projection that we want to output. So it's using Google projection. The projection that we see inside the layer at the very bottom is the projection that the data that we have in the databases. So MapServer basically, and the way that you specify the data is just as a regular SQL query. And if you want to filter, this is the way that you would do it. So you just give like percent symbols, and that represents a variable. So those variables you can pass it from a URL, or even if you're using open layers or something like that, you pass it by, and you will have to give it a default first, and then you will be able to change it in your program or your URL. So inside the class and style, you will see you can change the symbol of the point layer, so you can have like a circle, square, and you can even customize those symbols through the symbol set. So the symbol set is basically pretty similar to a map file. You just have to create like points and how you want to display that image. And you can, and even for this layer, if you want to not use points instead of an image, just you will just create a symbol that says I'll put this image. So you just have to specify like a path to that image.
Basically, you're using this kind of syntax to define where the data coming from, that it's point data, and that it should be put into the layer in form of the circle symbol.
Yeah, that's absolutely.
What MapServer is actually sending out is always a raster grid. So when is that true? Is it always outputting as a raster? So when you zoom in something like that, then it requests a new raster, and that's it.
Yeah.
Okay.
That depends on how you set up a service. If it's a feature service, you can actually get vector data out of it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So there are like a couple of different output formats from MapServer, starting from like JPEG, PNG images to KML and GML. So depends with what kind of data format you want.
That's specified somewhere here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where is it specified?
I think you will have to do it inside the layer with the data.
So when you're defining the layer definition and you want KML data, you should explicitly specify the format. It's by default it's always JPEG or PNG images. No, by default it's JPEG images.
So basically what MapServer is doing is it takes output from a file or database and translate it into a GIS-oriented format that can be used on the client side by some library.
How does so when the library queries MapServer, is what format? Just an HTTP request with?
It is a HTTP request. You can send it through like your URL and then get whatever you want from the database.
And then you give it some specific extent, and then it regenerates the image for you?
Yeah.
What's the performance implications of that?
Well, if it is a simple query, it's the performance doesn't suffer anything. But I know for when we wanted to get like the results for the digital layer, that query took like 20 seconds in SQL.
Yeah.
And for the map, when on table, now it took like 2 minutes or something like that.
Wow.
So the performance is bounded by database performance?
Well, it is a little bit of the database, and it's a little bit of MapServer. When you have like subqueries, it gets really slow. So they have like a built-in filter that you can use, but it doesn't work on SQL, but it works on other databases, special databases. I think for
Well, my experience with this, when you're having like a set of points, the performance is a lot better than when you're dealing with shapefiles that are stored in a database. So if you have maybe like 100,000 points and you want to generate JPEG images or like transparent images out of it, it's at least 20 times faster to generate that in comparison to accessing shapefiles that are stored within that database.
So this is something you would use in situations where you have like 100,000 points?
Yeah, it works so when your data size is maybe like 100,000 points and data is coming in dynamically, so you have to regenerate your layer maybe like every 30 seconds or 1 minute. It's better to use a MapServer because the reason behind like the performance is better. It's using CGI interface that is usually used in web browsers for rendering say web pages. So that is a lot faster than other kinds of basically JS tools.
Cool.
So, well, you can see this, but this is a shapefile that is in this image. And if you want like the layer as a WFS server, the only thing that you will have to specify are those fields inside the web mesh data object. So you will only have to give the on-net resource. That is where you install your MapServer, so your localhost, your port, and MapServer.execute. And you will have to specify the WFS enable request, and that asterisk basically it says enable everything, so you can get features and you can get the features and the type and all that you can do with a WFS. So that was what we basically use for table nav and open layers. We wanted to do something to customize that, and we needed to have that as a vector layer. So we had to do this. So you basically have to do it on inside your map and inside of your layer if you want to have WFS capabilities. And the only thing that changes is just have to provide the title, the source, and what you want to do with that layer in the enable request.
What is WFS? Web Feature Service. It's a standard format for distributing, not like maps, large bitmaps of map area, but distinct features like dots and lines or polygons, that sort of thing.
So that's a standard format that are used by GIS clients to access the feature data.
Yes, a standard format that's hosted by all sorts of servers.
So we could get the same kind of information out of ArcGIS or
Yeah.
GSO.
Yeah, so basically if you have this, you can get this information in an XML file or EML file. It depends if you want an email, you have to specify it, but an XML, you can just put the information in your URL, give your map, and it will be displayed the whole information with platinums
And WFS is returning a vector format.
Basically, yeah.
So the way that you have to view and test your layer, if you want to just see the image, you will just have to provide the place where you store your map file, your map server, and just give the path of the map where you have your map file. And the ampersand is just basically if you want to have like variables. So for example of the SQL, we had like a start and end dates. And so you can just give after that map ampersand, you can just say a start equals and whatever you want as a default. And the other thing, if you want to test a layer, the problem with MapServer is that there isn't a tool that says like you have this syntax error or this configuration problem. But there is a tool that you can run on your command prompt line. It's called SHP to image, and basically you just give like the map that you want to test, the layer, and if you want to have like information about performance issues, you can actually see like this layer is taking 2 seconds to render or things like that. So you can basically use this tool to catch performance issues and check your map file and see how you can get this better.
So you would always use it for debugging?
Yeah, basically. It just outputs an image. So you will give the information to this tool and put an output PNG and you will see there's a problem. And you will see, it will actually say if you have a problem on this line or this label doesn't exist or something like that. It wouldn't give you like recommendations to as of what did you actually do, but it will say something like
Okay.